Why change? Because I want something I don't have. Why now? Because the impact is too great to ignore. If you think about just those two parts of the conversation, the first half of the four questions, what you're doing in that case is, if you're a salesperson who's recognizing the need to ask and answer those questions, you're actually defining your prospect's definition of value. You're understanding what they value. So we all hear that we should be value-based salespeople, right? Are you selling value? What's interesting is, to your point before, if we're training salespeople to sell our product and we're training them to sell our value proposition, and we go out to market and pitch our value prop, then we're doing ourselves a disservice.
You're listening to the Sales Today podcast, and I'm your host, Fred Copestake. On this podcast, we explore how sales professionals can develop a modern approach to winning business, the application of virtual selling techniques, how to create meaningful business relationships, and much more. Why not take our free collaborative selling scorecard to see how your sales approach suits today's environment? You'll find a link in the show notes. And welcome to this episode of the Sales Today podcast, where I'm delighted to be joined by James Rores. James is the CEO and founder of the Floriss Group, which is all about helping CEOs to drive revenue, profits, and enterprise value, which of course involves selling. So James, welcome.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to this. I mean, we've had a chat before. And the hardest thing for me is, what are we going to do the podcast about? Because there's so many things that you deal with and that you have expertise in tackling. I've had to rack my brain a little bit. In the end, I've gone for, because I want to try and get this to be quite tactical, quite operational. One of the keynotes that I know you deliver, I'd like to pick this a little bit with you, which is about the 4 whys that every prospect must ask and answer. And of course, if you're a good salesperson, you might want to help them with that.
Yeah.
So that's today's subject. The 4 whys every prospect must ask and answer. So There we go, James.
Let's talk about it. Yeah. Well, I think that the genesis of this idea, came from a core belief that we have, that people love to buy as much as they hate being sold. And it's true for myself, and I think it's true for most folks that I talk to. When people are buying, they're generally in control, right? They feel like they're in control, and they feel like they're taking the steps they need to solve the problem that they perceive they have. They hate being sold because that's the salesperson taking that control away from the buyer, and maybe even trying to push the buyer in a direction that they're not convinced that they need to go in yet. So there's a tension created there in selling that isn't as enjoyable from the buyer's perspective. So how do we build salespeople that create relationships with buyers that they enjoy, while still maintaining a leadership role in the process so they can guide that buyer to a successful buying decision? So the only way we can do that is if we practice sales as a leadership competency, and base that leadership competency on serving and leading that buyer to change. How do you serve a buyer? You've got to respect the process that they go through. And the beautiful thing about this process, this universal buying cycle that we've identified, it's driven by 4 questions. But those 4 questions also translate into a perfect sales process. So it's a customer-centric approach to selling that creates a customer-centric sales process that aligns me with my buyer, no matter who the buyer is or at what point in the buying conversation we're in. And it turns out,
sorry if I can just pause you there, because there's so much you've given already that I like. I'm writing things and underlining.
You got to grab me, man, because I can keep going on this forever.
I know, it's a keynote, isn't it?
I'm sure it's helpful.
So the keynote being interrupted by that annoying person on the front row. Can you just go back to that a little bit? But what I'm doing is I want to underline some of the stuff you're saying here.
Yeah.
I mean, but there's a whole podcast episode in People Love to Buy That Hate Being Sold. I mean, that is one in itself. And
Yeah.
I love the thing that you're saying there about control and that feeling of control and being out of control.
Yeah.
And perhaps that throwback to the reputation that we still carry a little bit as salespeople of sort of being a bit sort of slimy and a bit sort of pushy and only our interests at heart and all that.
Yeah.
So this idea of building the salesperson who can guide the relationship, and then sales as a leader, a servant leadership. I mean, this is stuff that I'm big into. Which then genuinely, because people love to throw around customer centricity, don't they? We're customer centric.
Yeah.
We're buyer focused. I mean, that's just like, I don't know. Do you think that's sometimes paying lip service to it because it just sounds nice and it's meant to
It's a
make people
great
feel
marketing
good?
ploy. It's a trend
It's
that
marketing
people want
ploy.
to hear. Can you actually operate that way is the question. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, the proof in the pudding is your sales cycle aligned to the buying cycle? And that's what you're saying here. And that's what we're going to break down into. This is what they're going to go through. Are you helping them do that? That
Well said.
simple, almost. Yeah.
So
Awesome. Right. Sorry to interrupt you. We better carry on
no,
in you talked about the universal buying cycle.
yeah.
Just explain that a little bit if you could.
Thank you. Yeah, let's start there. So this is based on a premise and observation over 30 years that hasn't been disproven over 30 years, that there are 4 questions every prospect must ask and answer before they buy. And it doesn't matter who you are or what you're buying. We all as human beings have operated the same way since the Stone Age, right? Since the first recorded commercial transaction, right? Yeah, so think about
that? Was that my stone wheel for your fish or something like
yeah,
that?
exactly right. When currency began to be developed and we began recognizing trade as something that would build society, right?
Yeah.
So there are 4 questions. The first question is why change, right? So the second question, let's go through the questions. Why change? Why now? So why buy? Why buy anything? And then why you? So if you just think about your own behavior as a buyer, a solution doesn't matter if you haven't already decided that there's a reason to change. And the only reason we change is because we decide that we want something we don't have. And it's got to be something significant, right? That's going to cause us to go out and actually disrupt our lives and go search out this solution for what I want. So that the answer to the question, why change, is because I want something that's compelling that I don't have. Why now is the next question. Why do I need it this moment while I'm out shopping or I'm on the internet searching, et cetera? Because the impact is too great to ignore, right? Why change? Because I want something. Why now? Because the impact of success, failure, or doing nothing is too great to ignore. Why buy? Because there's a need. There's something missing that is holding me back from getting what I want. So why buy? Because I can't replicate the requirements. I can't fill the requirements myself. I have to go out and acquire those capabilities from somebody else. And then why you? Why should I buy from you, right? Why do you have the solution that is going to make me successful?
Awesome. Yeah.
Okay.
I can see. So I'm kind of thinking all the different industries I work in, and then thinking from my own personal point of view. And yeah, I mean, please get in contact with us. Anybody who's listening, if you can say that isn't the way that people think and operate. As you say, you've been looking at this 30, 40 years, and it's not been broken yet.
Yeah, and think about, Fred. Think about just I have 2 daughters. I go shopping all the time. We go to the mall wherever we're going. I'm just on vacation. I end up being dragged along to stores that I'm not going to typically buy anything at, right? So I'll window shop. I'll go look for something that does interest me. You think about the retailers stepping out of the store and grabbing me while I'm window shopping. They can ask a question: is there anything I can do to help you? And of course, I'm just window shopping. I'm going to say my default is going to be no. But they could ask me a question that focuses me on why change? The first question I have to ask and answer to actually decide that I'm going to actually be involved in a buying decision or an active buying cycle. So she could come out, and the retailer could come out of the store and suggest to me, if it's springtime, is there anything I can do to help you? My answer is no. May I ask you a question? Spring's coming. What's the one item in your wardrobe that you cannot wait to put on this spring? And I might suggest, hey, I have no idea. I haven't thought about my spring wardrobe. I have no clue. And her point might be, wouldn't it be great if there was one thing that in your closet that you couldn't wait to wear, that made you feel so good that you just were looking for an excuse to put that on? I might say, yeah. She's just asked me a question that triggers a feeling inside of me that maybe change is good. She hasn't tried to sell me her solution, because right now she has no idea what I might buy. She's just introducing the concept of change, which now activates a buying cycle and allows her to go through the rest of the whys, leading me toward that successful buying decision.
Okay, so interested. The thing we're doing is activating change, or activating thinking about change. And change is what it's all about, yeah.
Yeah, and a lot of buyers come to us with an idea of what change makes sense, but we as the expert recognize, as a salesperson who's the expert in our offering, we recognize that they may not have the right idea in mind. So we have to then disrupt the original reason that they had for change, and maybe give them a new idea, a new way to think about what's required. I can tell you a story. I was teaching my daughter how to ride a bike, and we got her through the process, and she had learned, and she was out there having fun with her friends. The one thing that she didn't have, that all her friends didn't have, was a helmet, a way to protect her. And because her friends weren't wearing a helmet, I wanted her to, I had to figure out how to have a conversation with her that would turn her into somebody who voluntarily wore that helmet, not leveraging forced manipulation or some sort of contempt or anger to get her to wear that helmet, right? Because if I didn't get her to voluntarily choose it, it would end up in the woods as soon as she turned the corner out of sight. So what question did I ask her to help her think about change? The first question I asked was, how many times, sweetheart, do you have to fall off your bike and hit your head before you can't ride your bike again? She's like, well, Dad, I fall off my bike all the time. Not a big deal. So I asked her a different question, a more powerful question. What would happen? How many times do you think you have to fall off your bike before you hit your head and can never dance again? All right, something she had dedicated her life up to that point to. She just loved dance. It made her think. It made her think about the value of her health over the value of being accepted necessarily by her peers, right? Or not rocking the boat with her peers. So I caused her to think about change, and she began to get pretty emotional. And I asked her, well, what do you have to do, right, to prevent that from happening? What's missing? The needs question. She went right to elbow pad, knee pad, all the things that she might need to protect herself. My suggestion is, why don't we just start with your helmet? She loved the idea, and then we continue the process of picking it out and moving forward from there. And what was really powerful about this, Fred, is that when she put the helmet on and went to play with her friends asked her why the helmet. And she looked at one of the guys and said, look, John, how many times do you think you have to fall off your bike and hit your head before you can never play baseball again? Right? So she not only bought into the idea, but she became a champion of the idea. And so what we find is that if we can sell the way our customers buy, we can actually walk them through a process where they buy into the ideas that we're presenting, and they can also become champions of these ideas. When we can't be at the decision-making table, they can drive the ideas and assist us in closing when we can't be at the decision-making table. So it's a very powerful way to go if you're executing and according to the methodology, can be very powerful and very easy to pick up, and really relieve sales folks a lot of the stress and pressure they feel when they go to market, thinking about closing something versus thinking about connecting with that buyer, right? It's the idea of always be connecting versus always be closing.
Yeah.
It's a different mentality, and it produces a different outcome.
It does. And actually, while you were talking there, I wrote down, is that the biggest struggle salespeople have? And you answered the question before I even asked it, which is, this is, and to the degree that, you said this is where, people do get stressed. They're under pressure to do this because they are thinking about the close, and they are often trained to talk about what color the helmet is, or how much padding there is inside it, or how comfortable the chin strap is, or all this sort of stuff, and not trigger that emotion, or do something that's getting that thought going. That's the skill that I know. I'd say that if we get that sorted, the rest does fall into place, and it's a lot easier, not easy, but easier to start to help sales become even more successful.
Yeah. And if you think about it too, it differentiates you as a salesperson, right? If most salespeople are operating in one way and you choose to approach a buyer in another way, one that requires a deeper level of understanding of their situation. So I'm more knowledgeable in their world, maybe even more so than they are, certainly in the context of the problem that I can solve. If I can bring that level of understanding, I can achieve a level of intimacy, emotional intimacy in that relationship that allows us to create a connection, right? The understanding turns into a level of trust, which once they understand the core competency and expertise I bring to the table, can turn into a level of respect, right? That allows them to look at me differently than a typical salesperson who's just going to show up and operate more like that order taker versus the order maker, somebody who can actually make a difference, right? We oftentimes talk about bringing value. You can't sell value unless you bring value. And this is a conversation framework that allows you to, as a salesperson, expose the value that you bring to the client in a very personal way.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, often the way in which someone is going to buy, that's your only differentiator anyway, isn't it? I mean, I've got a picture of a helmet in my head now. Sorry, it's probably there for the rest of the podcast. I'm going to keep
It's a
coming back to
commodity
this.
product, right?
But how many podcasts are the same? Helmets are the same,
Right.
and it's yellow. Well, okay, I don't like yellow. Or it's red. The way in which you sell, that's what's going to set you apart. I find salespeople struggle with this quite a bit. They're desperate to try and prove me wrong and talk about, well, no, our product's got this little red button on it, or it's got this thing, or it does this thing, or it does that thing. They want to kind of fight back with it rather than kind of say, well, okay, I sell that as well. I'm going to put a red button on it. Now it's exactly the same. Rather than want to kind of really focus on that way of selling to they become the differentiator. That's what's really going to set you apart. Why do you think people often don't want to go down that route? Why do they find it so hard to?
Yeah, I think it's this level of intimacy that's really hard for most people to get over, right? A salesperson has to move from the comfort, oftentimes, of operating as a separate island, right? I'm going to go out as this purveyor of a service or product and just pitch. Whoever buys it, great. Whoever doesn't want it, that's fine too. But there's a level of separation that I, as a salesperson, don't feel comfortable moving beyond. And so, salespeople have to recognize that if you want the kind of buying relationship that we all want, you can't just wait to meet a buyer who's going to facilitate that. You have to be the kind of salesperson that has a desire and interest in facilitating that in every conversation that you have. So we have to start with, to your point, Fred, with an interest in and a comfort level in creating that kind of deeper connection. We have to show up curious, right? We have to show up interested. Another way to think about this is we have to think about not falling in love with our product, but falling in love with the problem that we solve, that our prospects come to us with. the more interested we can be in their problem, the deeper and more intimate a connection I can create with them. And I can actually build a foundation, as I mentioned before, of trust and respect that will allow me to stand out. But without that desire to connect, without that curiosity that breaches that wall that comes up between strangers when they meet. I mean, that's it. If I'm not interested in breaking down that wall and breaching that wall, then I'm never going to create the connections, and I'm never going to be as powerful as a salesperson as I can be.
Yeah. I have been known to make enemies, maybe a bit strong, but to sort of have a pop at over training salespeople on products.
Yeah.
Actually, I did write an article saying product training is ruining salespeople. But because I mean, I love that analogy you said, like an island. You're an island, and then you build a whole load of defenses around your island, so you're more about you than ever before, and less about the customer. And you kind of learn about yourself once, and then you kind of strengthen. You've got to spend the time and effort to learn about the customer, don't you? And it's harder. And it takes effort, resource, time, and that curious mindset, as you say.
Yeah, and the curious mindset. And the other thing too is, if we take this a bit further, think about the way most salespeople approach their jobs. They approach their jobs from a defensive posture. Like they'll oftentimes ask you or ask me, how many times should I reach out to somebody? I don't want to feel like a pest. Or how soon should I reach out after I send them an email? I don't want to be a pest, right? We as salespeople oftentimes can fall into this feeling that we're not really selling value. We're trying to get someone to do something they really don't want to do. Like somehow that's the profession we've chosen in our life. So instead of approaching that on the relationship on our heels in a defensive posture, assuming that we are a pest, we can approach sales as a leader and think about practicing sales as a leadership competency. I'm not begging for the business. I'm actually, as a servant leader, serving a shared goal for growth, and I'm leading you down a shared path to change. I am actually showing up with a level of mastery that can deliver value to you. And why wouldn't you want to talk to me, right? So that Fred, that's the job of managers, leaders, coaches, to help identify salespeople who are leaning in that way, right, of selling on their heels, and help them think about, how can you approach this job in a different way? How can you practice sales as a leadership competency? How can you change the mindset of your role?
Yeah. And it's a little bit chicken and egg, isn't it? Because if you are understanding them better, seeing where you can have the impact, then that's going to help you be more confident in saying, I can do so much good stuff for these guys here. I have to speak to them, for them, not just for me. It, goes around, comes around, doesn't it? So,
Yes.
yeah. So, I mean, which kind of leads us, I guess, so that's the why change bit. And I mean, I've used the word impact, which is what you're talking about on the why now. What other things are we doing then? We've got in, we've led well, shown them we understand them, seen something that's piquing their interest and going, okay. What more can we do then when we start focusing in on the impact piece for the why now?
Yeah. So why change? Because I want something I don't have. Why now? Because the impact is too great to ignore. If you think about just those two parts of the conversation, the first half of the four questions, what you're doing in that case is, if you're a salesperson who's recognizing the need to ask and answer those questions, you're actually defining your prospect's definition of value. You're understanding what they value. So we all hear that we should be value-based salespeople, right? Are you selling value? What's interesting is, to your point before, if we're training salespeople to sell our product, and we're training them to sell our value proposition, and we go out to market and pitch our value prop, then we're doing ourselves a disservice. We could be instead asking these two questions, why change, why now, to understand how the client defines value. And then that gives us a chance to then go to the next step, which is explore what's missing, what's holding them back.
Yeah.
What needs are preventing them from achieving that value. And so every conversation thereafter can be compared to the value they want to achieve. So when I expose something that they're missing, a need, I can say, look, what would be the value to you of having this need addressed in the context of the business case that we've just built for you. So what I can do is I can now prioritize the needs that I identify in terms of those that are must-haves versus nice-to-haves. The must-haves are the ones that most directly relate to delivering the value that we've defined. And I can focus on those must-haves, and I can focus on differentiating myself in the context of those must-haves. And by doing so, I can get rid of a lot of the competition that I might be competing with, the incumbent that I might be dealing with. And I can make the value conversation connect to the needs conversation, which then allows me to create a unique differentiation for why you, the last question, why you? Because I have a solution that is uniquely qualified to not only address the needs that you have, but to deliver the value that you seek. And now any price I give will be compared to the value proposition I established. If I give a price before I establish value, then what am I doing? I give the client a price and they have to figure out if that price is good or not, if it's fair or not. The only way they can do that if I haven't established value is go to a competitor and compare that price. So if I'm not a value-based seller, I actually create competition for myself in a sales process and degrade my own ability to close that deal because I'm pitching a price that client has to compare to somebody else.
Love it. Oh, you have so elegantly defined value-based selling there. I mean, you saw me smiling, you probably even heard me giggling, when it's like the prospect defines the value. I was thinking, well, who else does? That's the only person that can. You can if you want to, but I mean, it's a broadly pointless exercise. It's not totally, because it gives you an idea where you might end up. It has to be them that defines it, doesn't it? Has to be.
Yeah.
And then you explained exactly why. That's why you need to. What's stopping you? Okay, priorities there, right? I can then start to put forward what I'm going to do based around that. And that's what makes it unique. So I just want to have a little bit more discussion around the word unique, because again, I think this is something that sellers get badly wrong, isn't it? You're smiling now. Why do they get it so wrong?
Well, here's the issue. So here's a great example of the issue of uniqueness. So when you think about the WINS methodology, want, impact, need, solution, the first thing we're doing is we're saving the solution conversation for the last conversation. We actually call these the 4 agreements. So the 4 whys create 4 agreements. What you want, the impact that you want to achieve, that's required to make this all work, the needs, what's missing, and then of course the solution that's going to deliver that's going to solve your problem. Those are the agreements that we're looking for. That the agreement around impact is perhaps the hardest one to achieve. And so if we're looking for ways to be unique, we cannot, for example, bring a generic value proposition to the table that any of our competition can use. So for example, I was building a sales force for a company that sold mentoring solutions. I was an investor in the company, spent a couple of years helping them build out their early stage sales process. And so I was an early seller of their stuff. And we started with a value proposition that looked at things like the cost of turnover and the value of reducing turnover, and thereby providing an economic argument for implementing a mentoring solution. The problem with that ROI calculus is that any of my competition could use the same thing. It didn't differentiate me as a seller. So what I had to do is I had to look at the capabilities that our tool brought to the market that were unique. And then I had to translate those capabilities into impacts, ways that I could impact my clients that my competition could not. And so what that allowed me to do was to narrow the focus of my sales conversations on the things that differentiated me from the competition and build value for those things, while my competition was just going through a laundry list of features and functions and just pitching that over the table. That's one example of how you can really establish your unique value proposition to the clients you're talking to.
Yeah, and I think that's, I mean, what you just said in between was where people make the mistake. They pitch features and functions, but they're clever because they're going to pitch the ones which nobody else has. That's what makes them unique. And that's where we get our definition wrong. It's like, okay, they haven't got the red button on it. They haven't got the thing which does that. But so what? It's just irrelevant to the impact and the thing that we're trying to do here. So you're just talking about stuff that's pointless. But it's unique, though, people say. But it doesn't matter. So it's irrelevant. And then, again, I've been caught up in discussions with salespeople where they can't let go of this. This is what I've learned, so we've got to say it because we're different to everybody else.
Right.
So what? Yeah.
Right.
Back to your impact and whether the customer's even going to care.
Exactly, Fred. And here's another way to use this. If you get this down right as a salesperson, think about how many times when you've sold feature function, a buyer comes back and says, well, they've got 10 capabilities and you only have 5, right? So you don't seem valuable to me. If we do this conversation properly, what we can do is it doesn't matter if I've got 10. It doesn't, the side-by-side analysis doesn't matter as long as my 5 are the 5 that are the most important to delivering you the impact that you seek. If the other 5 that my competition, or the 8 or 10 of the ones that my competition offers, really can't deliver the impact you seek, then why even consider them? So it gives a salesperson now a chance to address objections that are product related that might make you feel like your product isn't competitive in the marketplace just by pure volume of features and functions. Forget about it. Focus on what you do that's unique and build a business case for that. And then you can compete against anybody else that's out there that is just trying to throw stuff against the wall to see if it sticks. You can build a cogent argument for your stuff that doesn't rely on you having the latest bells and whistles, as long as those bells and whistles aren't really addressing must-have requirements. If they're nice to haves, you can sell beyond them and still close that deal.
Yeah. I mean, and this is going back to the thing you said early on, which is about how you sell is your differentiator. That one with the 10 could be way, way better. Every single one of those, they could have the same 5, they're better.
Yeah.
And there's more. But if the salesperson hasn't done the job to help point out that this is why they're there and that's what it's going to do for you, it's just a list of things. You've done the hard yards to help them realize this is why these 5 things that you're going to point out are making a difference. You're in the box seat. Yeah. And the very fact that you are communicating with somebody and they're feeling as though you get me. Yeah, I'm comfortable with you here. You've got my back, haven't you? Yes, I have. We're all about you.
Yeah, that's the most powerful thing you could hear from a buyer is you get me. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Not, oh, you've learned your catalog really well. Oh, you'd make a wonderful website. No, sorry. We're recording on a Friday. I'm always a bit facetious. I'm sorry, James. Nah, this stuff is awesome. This stuff is awesome. The 4 whys, natural way of stepping through them. Now, there's a lot of skill, there's a lot of things, there's technique, there's ways in which people can learn to do this stuff better.
Yeah.
But even just understanding that that's the way forward, not learning pitches off by heart, not using silly manipulative tactics, that puts people on the right course very quickly, doesn't it? Very quickly. Yeah. I love this.
Awesome.
I can't believe how fast the time's gone. I could talk about this stuff all day. I mean, this is stuff that you do. This is what you specialize in. Your organization is built around this. How do people get in touch with you? How can they get more from you?
Well, I appreciate that. Easy to find me on LinkedIn, James Rores, Rores. I think I'm the only one there. Or Floriss Group, our website, FLORISS group.com. And we offer, for anyone who's interested, we offer a free wins profile. So if you're curious about your dominant sales style and whether or not you practice sales as a leadership competency today, you can take, it's a 5-minute assessment. You can take it, get some good insights. We'll even provide you with a half-hour free review of your results if you like.
Awesome. I'll drop all of those into the show notes so that people don't have to go and find them all. They can just click straight through on them. So, James, thank you so much. Thank you so much for coming in and sharing that. Really distilled quite complex stuff down into, for me, and I hopefully everyone else, really easy ways to understand that hopefully we can get out and start to use by thinking just a tad different if we're not doing this already.
My pleasure. Look forward to the next time.
Oh, the wins formula. Thank you for listening to the Sales Today podcast with me, your host, Fred Copestake. I hope you've enjoyed what you heard today. If you did, please get in touch and hit subscribe. And remember, you can take the Collaborative Selling Scorecard for free to check out how your sales approach works in today's environment. You'll find it in the show notes.